Tonight, you make the last payment. You've imagined this night for years. You thought you'd feel something enormous. You're surprised by how quiet it is. You know the exact number by heart. You've known it the way you know your own birthday, the way you know a thing you can't escape. For years, it lived in the corner of every decision. The dinner you didn't order, the trip you didn't take, the text from a friend you left on read because yes cost money you'd already promised to someone else. It followed you into the grocery store where you did math in the cereal aisle. It sat with you at 2 a.m., the brightness of your phone turned all the way down so the number wouldn't feel so loud. It had a name on a statement, but really it was just a weight, a thing you carried up every single day and set down for no one. And tonight you set it down for good. So why does your hand hesitate over the button? Rewind a few years. $41,360. It didn't come from anything dramatic. That's the part nobody tells you about debt. It's rarely a yacht. It's a transmission that died the same month as a medical bill. It's the credit card that bridged the gap when your hours got cut. It's a degree that didn't pay what they promised, and a year you survived on plastic because survival was the only line item that mattered. You weren't reckless. You were alive during an expensive stretch of being alive. There's a difference, even if the statement doesn't show it. For a long time, you didn't add it up. Adding it up made it real, and real was unbearable. You knew the minimums, $487 a month scattered across a car loan, 2 cards, and a student loan, but you never let yourself see the whole number in one place. Until one night you did. You opened every account, and you wrote the total on an index card, and you taped it to the fridge where you'd have to look at it. $41,360. It felt like a sentence. It was the first honest thing you'd done about money in years. People will tell you the first step out of debt is a budget. It isn't. The first step is letting yourself see the number without flinching. You can't pay off a thing you won't look at. You learned the words that week. Snowball. Avalanche. Avalanche says pay the highest interest first. It's the cheapest math, the way a calculator would do it. Snowball says pay the smallest balance first, kill one whole account, feel one real win, and let that feeling carry you to the next. The calculator would have chosen Avalanche. You chose Snowball because you weren't a calculator. You were a tired person who needed to believe this was possible, and proof is worth more than a few dollars of interest when you're standing at the bottom of a mountain. So you listed them smallest to largest. The $800 store card went first. You threw everything you could find at it, a sold couch, a month of no takeout, a side shift on Saturdays at a diner where the coffee was burnt and the tips were honest. 6 weeks later, it hit zero. You cut the card up over the trash can. It was the most expensive $800 you'd ever paid and the cheapest joy you'd felt in a year. You crossed out the number on the fridge and wrote a smaller one. $38,900, still enormous. But it had moved. For the first time, the number was afraid of you instead of the other way around. That's the secret the budgeting apps undersell. The math of debt is simple. The math was never the problem. The problem is staying when it's boring, staying when it's slow, staying when nothing visible changes for months. Snowball isn't better math, it's better fuel. A year in, you noticed you'd become someone. Not richer. Not yet. But someone. The kind of person who knew to the dollar what was in their account. Who felt a small flat calm at the checkout instead of a spike of fear. Who had stopped lying, to the bank, to friends, and mostly to themselves. The diner shifts became a rhythm. The spreadsheet became a habit you didn't dread. The number on the fridge dropped below the price of a new car, then below the price of a used one, and you marked each threshold quietly, alone, because the people in your life had no idea this war was even happening. That's the loneliest part of getting out of debt. It's invisible. Nobody throws a party because you didn't buy something. There's no photo of the trip you skipped. The whole victory is made of things that didn't happen, and you celebrate it by yourself, in a kitchen, with a pen. You started to understand that the $487 a month wasn't really going to the bank. It was going to a future version of you, the one who would one day get that money back every month for the rest of their life. You weren't paying a debt. You were buying a raise. You just had to deliver it to yourself, one boring month at a time. 31,200, crossed out, rewritten. The card on the fridge was getting hard to read under all the lines. There was a cost the spreadsheet never tracked. A friend got married the second summer. The flight, the hotel, the gift, the suit, it added up to a month of progress, and you knew the number on the fridge would feel it for half a year. So you sent your love and a card and a small check you couldn't quite afford, and you didn't go. They understood. You're still not sure you've forgiven yourself. You stopped going out, mostly. Not in a dramatic way, just a slow narrowing. "I can't" this month became a sentence you said so often that people stopped asking, which was a relief and a grief at the same time. Dating felt impossible. How do you explain that every dollar is already promised to a past version of you who needed help? Your family thought you were being strange. Cheap, even. They didn't see the war because you'd chosen to fight it quietly, and quiet wars don't get medals. A relative made a joke about you counting pennies and you laughed, and it stung for a week. But a few people surprised you. A co-worker who'd done it themselves started bringing 2 coffees on the Saturday shift, no explanation. A friend who stopped suggesting expensive plans and started suggesting walks. The debt didn't only cost you things. It quietly showed you who was a yes, regardless of the number, and who only ever spoke the language of money. That's a thing you only learn at the bottom. It's expensive tuition. But the lesson is real, and it's yours for good. And then the car died. Of course it did. It's almost a law. The moment you build momentum, life sends a bill to test whether you meant it. The repair was $2,000 you didn't have set aside because every spare dollar had a job, and that job was the number on the fridge. So you watched it go the wrong way for the first time in a year. 31,000 became 33,750. You sat in the parking lot and felt the old despair come back like a tide that never really left, just waited. This is where most people quit. Not at the beginning. The beginning is easy. The beginning has adrenaline. People quit here, at the setback, because a setback whispers the cruelest thing debt can say. "See, you'll never get out. Why are you torturing yourself? Just live." You almost listened. You had the other card in your hand, the one with room on it, and for one long minute the easy thing looked like mercy. But you'd learned something the number taught you. A setback isn't a reversal. It's a withdrawal from an account you'd actually been building, the account of being someone who handles it. You paid for the car. You started a tiny emergency fund, $1,000, so the next time life sent a bill, it wouldn't be allowed to touch the fridge. And you kept going. The difference between people who get out and people who don't isn't income. It's what they do in the parking lot. Something shifts when a debt drops below the halfway mark. The math doesn't change, but you do. By year 2, you'd killed the second card and started on the car loan. And here's the quiet magic of the snowball. Every account you closed freed up its minimum, and you rolled that money onto the next one. The payments didn't shrink as the debt shrank. They grew. The avalanche you'd started by hand was now rolling on its own weight. The $800 a month you were now throwing at the car loan used to be 4 separate payments to 4 separate creditors. Now it was one fist instead of 4 open hands. The number on the fridge started falling faster than it ever had, and for the first time the end was a real place you could see, not a fantasy you used to fall asleep. 19,400. Under 20 for the first time since the night you wrote it down. You stood in the kitchen and let yourself feel it for exactly 1 minute, and then you went back to work because that was who you were now. You'd stopped saying, "When I'm out of debt, I'll finally relax." You'd started to suspect the discipline wasn't a prison sentence you'd serve and escape. It was a tool you were going to keep. The last stretch is strange. It's the closest and it feels the longest. $6,800. After 41, it should have felt like nothing. But the last few thousand of any debt are the heaviest, because now you can taste the end, and wanting it makes the waiting unbearable. You got impatient. You picked up extra shifts you didn't need to, threw birthday money at it, sold things you'd been saving just in case. The just in case was almost over. You watched the balance the way you'd once watched it in fear, except now it was hope wearing the same face. 6,000. 4. 2,000 and change. You could see the bottom of it now, like the floor of a pool you'd been treading water in for 3 years. And one ordinary Tuesday night, you logged in, and the only thing left was a single payment. The whole war, down to one number, smaller than a month of the rent you used to panic about. Which brings you back to tonight. Your hand over the button. The last payment. You press it. A small spinning wheel. A confirmation screen. And then a number you have not seen next to your name in years. 0. You wait for the fireworks. They don't come. The apartment is exactly as quiet as it was a minute ago. The refrigerator hums. A car passes outside. Nothing on earth looks different. This is the secret nobody warns you about. Freedom doesn't arrive like a parade. It arrives like a silence, the absence of a sound you'd been hearing for so long you'd stop noticing it was there. The debt had been a low hum under every thought, and now the hum is gone, and the quiet is so total it feels almost like loss. So you take the index card off the fridge. The number is crossed out so many times it's barely a number anymore. You don't throw it away. You put it in a drawer because some part of you understands you'll want to remember the weight, so you never pick it up again by accident. $0. The most expensive, the cheapest, the loudest, the quietest number of your life. And the strangest feeling of all, you almost miss it. Here's what they really don't tell you. The hardest part of getting out of debt is the 6 months after. For 3 years, you had a purpose with a number attached. Every dollar knew where it was going. Now there was $487 a month with no orders, the raise you'd promised yourself, finally delivered, and a quiet voice that had been waiting 3 years to say, "You earned this, spend it." This is where the story usually ends badly. This is where the freed-up payment quietly becomes a nicer car, a bigger apartment, a lifestyle that rises to swallow the raise. And 2 years later, a new statement, a new number, a new index card you swear you won't tape to the fridge this time. Most people who get out of debt get back in. Not because they're weak, because nobody taught them that the discipline was the prize, and they set it down the moment they didn't need it. But you'd carried the weight too long to hand it to a car salesman. So you did something quiet and radical. You kept making the payment, $487 a month, except now you paid it to yourself, into an index fund you didn't touch, into the emergency fund until just in case had a real answer. The same muscle, the same boring Tuesday, pointed at a future instead of a past. The debt was gone. The person it built was not. That, it turns out, was the asset all along. A year after 0, you logged into a different kind of account. The $487 a month, the raise you'd kept paying yourself, had become something you'd never had before. A balance that grew while you slept. Not from your work, from its own. The first time you saw interest earned instead of interest charged, you sat with it the way you'd once sat with the overdraft, except this time the quiet was the good kind. It wasn't a fortune. Compound interest is boring for a long time before it's breathtaking. It's a snowball that needs a whole mountain to show what it can do. But for the first time, the math was working for you instead of against you. And you understood, in your body and not just your head, why the people who have money seem to keep it without trying. They're not trying. The number is, you bought one thing that year on purpose in cash, something small you'd wanted through the whole climb and refused yourself. You don't even remember what it cost. You remember that no one was owed anything when you walked out, that the next morning there was no statement, no minimum, no quiet hum. Just a thing you owned in a life you owned, paid for by the person you'd become. The index card stayed in the drawer. You never needed it again. But you kept it, the way you keep a photo of a hard year, not because you miss it, but because it made you. People think paying off debt is about the money. It's about the money for exactly one night, the night the number hits 0. After that, it was never about the money at all. The $41,000 took years to repay. But the debt charged you in a second currency you didn't notice you were earning. It made you someone who looks at the number without flinching. Someone who stays when it's boring. Someone who, in the parking lot on the worst day, does the next right thing anyway. You can't buy that person. You can only become them, usually by carrying something heavy for longer than you wanted to. So if you're somewhere in the middle of it tonight, the index card on your own fridge, the math in the cereal aisle, the button you can't quite press yet, understand what's actually happening. You are not just paying off a debt. You are being raised by a hard, patient teacher into the kind of person who will never need one again. Pay the last dollar, then keep the discipline. The number was never the prize. The person you became while you paid it, that was the number that raised you. This is Merlin Money. Count it quietly.